Right, I would say, shall we make a start? Basically the survivor's photo here, if you survived the heat so far. We are very lucky that Agata Savary traveled all the way over. So basically I invited her and she will tell you far more about this than I will do about, because she has worked extensively on this Parsimi project, which I think is one of the few actually contexts where you really have a quite stringent definition of light verb constructions. I think we've hit that definitional problem a couple of times today, that we were not quite on the same page as to who is defining what as like part of this group of constructions or not. So I'm very, very grateful to you for traveling all the way over, and I will leave the floor to you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor, and it's very interesting to present this work to a different community that I usually present to. So it will be today about annotation and automatic identification of light verb constructions, so which can be, I think, compared to what the workshop calls support verb constructions. And I'm the author of this presentation, but I actually present on behalf of the whole community, which is huge, and I will go to it right now. So Parsim is a network that emerged from a coast action, so Europe funded scientific network that was called Parsing and Multiple Expressions, so that's where the acronym stems from, and it was funded in 2013 and 17, but it's still quite active. It included at that time 31 countries, 30 languages, 6 dialects, and 10 language genera, sorry. And it had quite many outcomes, so publications, resources, tutorials, methodologies, and even a book series dedicated to multiple expression. So the main outcome, the most visible one, is probably the multiple expression annotated corpus, which is a huge collaborative effort of 26 language teams with as many as 35 language leaders and 200 annotators. And so the characteristic features of this effort are that we first started with the developing annotation guidelines unified across 26 languages. So this was the actual objective. Because the effort was huge and the multiple expressions are so diverse, we firstly focused on verbal multiple expressions, because these at that time were the types that were considered the most challenging, both in linguistics and in natural language processing. So, this effort created manually annotated corpora for verbal multiple expressions in these 26 languages. They are all published under open licenses, so you can do whatever you basically want with these corpora. They are all very easily accessible, and what is more, they are continuously enhanced. So it's not just one publication, but we had 4 releases, as Vola mentioned today, of this corpus. So before going to a definition, I usually use this example. The primetime speech made by First Lady Michelle Obama set the house on fire. So it's an ancient sentence, but still very nice. Actually, 2 sentences. She made crystal clear which issues too hard, but which she was preaching to the choir. So you can see here an extreme density of multiple expressions, and all these colored things, by some criteria, could be considered multiple expressions. There were many attempts of a definition of what a multiple expression actually is, one that is kind of most generic in the NLP community is that it is a combination of at least 2 words which exhibit lexical, morphological, syntactic, or semantic idiosyncrasies. So something that is specific to an expression rather than generic for the kind of syntactic structure it represents. And idiosyncrasy is indeed considered as a particular feature as opposed to generic feature, and it's unusual, it's surprising, right? So of course this definition is imprecise in that we have hard time defining what a word actually is, but we actually somehow delegate it to a pre-processing step that another community does for us today, which is called universal dependencies. And of course, what is idiosyncratic, what is regular, is also a matter of scale. And this is the whole problem. You've been speaking here about the scale. And when we do NLP, we are happy to have these powerful tools, which are called neural networks, and they made a revolution in that we use what we call continuous representations of language rather than discrete representations. So meaning that we can represent a meaning or a word as a vector from a continuous scale of real number, multidimensional real number spaces. So this is continuous. Still, what we do in computer science is all discrete, because finally at the end of the process is binary, yes or no, right? So we have this strong constraint in NLP that is inherited from computer science, but not only from this, it's also logic. It's many things in science are working this way, and that we have to do with it, right? So even if we know that the phenomenon is a matter of scale, we still have to make binary decisions. So this is a strong constraint. And so we could mention many types of idiosyncrasies in multiple expressions. I said they could be lexical, morphological, syntactic, and semantic, but actually the clue, the most distinguished outstanding feature of idiosyncrasy in multiple expressions from our point of view is non-compositional semantics. And this is what we want to capture, non-compositional semantics, right? So for instance, to pull one's leg has a few direct links with pulling anything and a leg, right? It's instead to tease someone playfully. And as soon as I have said this, I must mention that linguists for decades have been telling us that non-compositional semantics is very hard to test directly. So we cannot just put a linguist or a language speaker in front of a sentence or an expression and ask him or her, is this compositional, semantically compositional? So we know this is what we want to capture, but we cannot just ask this question directly, right? So what we do instead fits very well to this workshop's topic, because it's on the border of lexicon and syntax. There is no word of semantics, right? And that's exactly what we learned from the state of the art in linguistics, is that semantic non-compositionality can be quite efficiently approximated by lexical and morphosyntactic inflexibility. So inflexibility is the guiding principle for us as a proxy for semantic non-compositionality, right? So again, we want to capture non-compositionality semantically speaking, but what we do is lexicon and morphosynthesis, okay? So the hypothesis precisely says a multiple expression is less flexible than a regular construction of the same syntactic structure. And of course, I apologize, there should be a whole range of linguists cited here on this slide, because it's not us who invented it, right? So an example is, if you want to decide if hot dog is a multiple expression, what you do is that you take another expression of which you know is regular and it has the same syntactic structure, like warm soup, and you will notice that you can replace components by synonyms or semantically close words from large semantic classes, and like hot soup or warm stew, and you know it's not the same meaning. There is a meaning shift, but this meaning shift is predictable from the former change. While in hot dog, this is not the case. Warm dog or hot terrier has a semantic shift which is much too big to be considered regular. So this is called lexical inflexibility, and I'm sure you are very familiar with these tests. So the other one is morphological inflexibility. When I cannot say to throw someone to the lion, I see there is the meaning shift which is too strong. So it's morphological inflexibility, and the same with syntactic inflexibility. For instance, with the passive, the die is cast cannot be replaced by someone casted by without a too strong meaning shift. And there could be other syntactic properties which are considered regular for this structure under study, and which are not or partly not admitted by accepted by the candidate construction. So that's how we test it in general, right? The thing is that yeah, before going to really live constructions, I will first specify that Parsim has largely dedicated its effort only to verbal multiple expressions, as I said, because at the time this was the least studied and covered type in NLP. And some reasons for that are that there are specific challenges for verbal multiple expressions, like discontinuity, for instance. Who mentioned a long distance dependency? Vula did. So there could be verb noun combinations which have a large gap, even in English. There could be interleaving, like one expression take into account which contains inside also another one, like give up. Some multiple expressions actually are single tokens, several words, but still single tokens, right? Like aufmachen in German, which is sometimes written together, sometimes separately, like macht auf. And most importantly, even if verbal multiple expressions are supposed to have to inherit inflexibility, this inflexibility is usually partial. So they are both flexible and inflexible. They are less flexible than regular constructions, but still often quite flexible. So this is what makes them hard to process, notably to identify with automatic procedures. There are other challenges which I don't mention, and as soon as we said this, that there is flexibility, one of the first steps that we do in Parsim to identify and test the multiple expression is actually to neutralize this flexibility. I will tell you later why. So neutralizing flexibility is done in this way, that when we come across an occurrence like no strings were pulled for him, we will ask the question, what is the canonical form of the same candidate expression? So a canonical form is understood as the least syntactically marked syntactic variant which preserves the idiomatic reading. And we try to mention kind of order of canonicity, which is not exhaustive, but it's still kind of natural for linguists to test. It occurs natural. So for instance, finite verb, a construction with a finite verb would be less syntactically marked than with an infinitive or a participle. An active voice is less marked than passive. Non-negated form is less marked than negated. A form with no extraction is less marked than extracted, and so on. So whenever we come across a candidate which seems not to be a canonical form, we look for the canonical form, right? So here we would first transform no strings were pulled for him to something like no one pulls strings for him, because it's passive and finite. But we cannot transform strings into a string because we will not be in presence of the same expression. And this is the form we test against our guidance. Okay, so it's not the corpus occurrences really directly, but corpus occurrences transformed into canonical forms that we test. Fine. Okay. So what we want to do in the first step is to manually annotate multiple expressions in corpus. So what it really means is that you open a text. Here's an example in Polish. We have this centralized annotation infrastructure tool called FLAT. and the text is divided into sentences and tokens. You don't see it, but that's the case. And you can select words, several words at a time, and apply and assign a label to them. So the labels are all possible multiple expression categories, and you just do it by hand, right? So that's the basic stuff, annotator stuff. Now, how do we do it? I think the major outcome of this effort is the annotation guidelines themselves. So we developed them with 3 objectives in mind. First of all, we want to formalize idiomaticity by the guidelines in a cross-linguistically unified way. So we would like to distinguish what is different because languages are different from what is different because linguistic traditions are different. Okay, so we try to unify methodology and still and do it in a computationally tractable way. So, for instance, when you speak about the continuum of idiomaticity, this is not something that today is computationally tractable in the sense of annotating. You see, so we cannot implement it in an easy way. Still, we want to unify what is truly similar, and we leave space for language-specific features and even parts of the guidelines. And we do have some sections that are language-specific, not many of them, but we do. So it's pretty much the same philosophy as people in universal dependencies apply. We actually worked initially in parallel, but we had the same intuitions and we have the same objectives. So currently these 2 initiatives are truly coming together to actually produce single resources rather than separate. Okay, and the third objective is very important, is to make these annotations reproducible. So if you take the same text and you do it 3 months later, we want you to take the same decision. And if someone else reads the same guidelines and takes the same text, we want them to make the same decisions. This is, of course, not perfectly possible, but a lot of effort went into this objective. Okay, so first of all, we after pilot annotations, we identified these categories, and so it's a typology which is, as you see, driven by what is proudly called universality. It's of course exaggerated because universal means applying to all languages. We only work on 26, so it's universal, like this, meaning applying to all languages in our scope. So far, these categories are universal, right, in our scope. So don't take it really literal. So on the first level, we have universal categories, quasi-universal categories, and experimental categories. So the first 2 ones are those that occur, that we observe in all languages under study, and these are precisely light verb constructions, which are of highest interest today, and verbal idioms. And the light verb constructions, and as Vula said, are subdivided into 2 categories. LVC full, so these are like give lectures in which we have a light verb which adds no semantic to the noun, to the predicative noun. But important test for us is that the subject of the verb is a semantic argument of the noun. Okay, so we have to ask ourselves, what are semantic arguments of the lecture? For instance, someone giving a lecture, and then check if the subject of the verb actually belongs to these semantic arguments of the noun. Okay. If not, then we check if then the subject of the verb is actually a cause of the noun. So, for instance, here in grant rights, what we kind of decide is to say rights can exist without anyone giving you, because maybe they are innate, right? So if someone gives you the right, then it's a causative multiple expression, right? While in give a lecture cannot exist without the person giving it, so it's a truly light verb constructions of type full. Then verbal idioms, I actually I should talk about it later, because verbal idioms are everything what does not belong to the other categories. That's what we do. Quasi-universal categories, yeah, sorry, and the important thing is that in verbal idioms there is a huge overlap in syntactic structures with LVCs. So most of the time when we annotate, we have to distinguish between LVCs and VADs. Okay, we'll see how it goes. Then we have quasi-universal categories, which are not present in all languages, but in many of them. And here there are inherently reflexive verbs like s'évanouir in French. In English, you have behave yourself or help yourself to something. They are few, but in Romance, especially in Slavic languages, there are many. It's the largest category actually. Then we have verb particle constructions, which are not present in Romance languages or Slavic languages, but they are present in Germanic languages, for instance, but also in Hungarian, for instance. So these are again subdivided into VPC full, where the verb without the preposition cannot refer to the same event as the verb with the preposition. So to do in, to kill someone, cannot refer to the same thing as to do. While in VPC semi, the verb without the preposition can, without the particle, can refer to the same event, but the specificity is that this particle is not spatial. So it's not like look up, which is really literally up, but it's still eat, you see. And then finally, we have multi-verb constructions, which are rare in European languages, but they are very frequent in Hindi, in Chinese, and so on. So we introduced them quite late when Hindi and Chinese joined us. So Karlena, for instance, is to do take, to verb with no clear depends between them, and this means to do something for one's own benefit. We also have one experimental category, which we are not very happy with. That's why we call it experimental, and some languages annotated, some others not. So these are inherently appositional verbs, where you have a verb with a preposition as opposed to a verb with a particle, right? So the particle does not take a complement while the preposition does. Okay, and now back to reproducibility. So the way we solve this, we address this objective is that because we are computer scientists, we make an algorithm. It's deterministic, right? So we have basically an is then else structure every time. So we ask a question in the form of a linguistic test. So this is really linguistic, and then you have to answer to the test yes or no. And when it's no, you go to one branch. When it's yes, you go to another branch. And everything is organized like this. So here, when you ask these tests, you have to answer yes or no, and then the outcome is different depending on it. Here again, if it's yes, if this test is yes, you go here. If it's no, you go here, and so on. And this provides that whenever you go through the same process again with the same candidate, you will obtain the same outcome, provided that you answer the tests in the same way. And this is where, as the Germans say, where the dog is buried, meaning that the true problem is in making the tests reproducible. They are atomic, right? These tests are atomic. So the chance to answer an atomic test in the same way twice is stronger than a decision that includes many criteria at the same time. So this is our idea, okay? And that's how we proceed. And I will show you an example. So we start always in the same place. That's this test S1, and the first 4 tests are structural. So the syntax is crucial here, because what we do is to ask things like, look at the candidate and is the head in the canonical form a verb? If so, then you ask, does it have exactly one dependent? If so, then you basically choose between. If so, then if it's a subject, it's a different branch, and if it's not a subject, it's a different branch. And if it's not a subject, this is the branch into which you go the most often, and then you look at the category of the object, no, of the dependent. But I will take examples. You will see how it works. Now you will see that this is one decision diagram, and this redirects to other decision diagrams, also if and else structures. So for instance, here we have very idiom-specific tests, and this is what is shown here. And this is basically a cascade. So you see that whenever a test works, you say, oh, this is a VAT. Okay, you see, for instance, you ask the question, does the candidate contain a cranberry word, like in go astray? Astray is a cranberry word meaning occurring only in multiple expressions, no standalone meaning. If so, then you already know it's a VAT. If not, you apply a different test. Can you replace one word by a synonym and lose the meaning? If so, then it's a VID. If not, you apply another test. So we basically, in this tree, we implement these tests, but we do it step by step, right? And the first test that works makes it a VAD. So one is enough in verbal idioms. But if we go to the LVC specific, LVC specific decision tree, that's a different story. And LVCs are special in our framework because they are the gray zone. And I'll tell you about it more. So the LVC specific decision diagram is much less straightforward than this one. Here, one test, past test is enough. In LVCs, it's the opposite, basically. All tests have to pass for it to make it an LVC. So you see, you ask a question, for instance, is the noun abstract? If no, you already know it's not an LVC. But this makes you go back to the generic tree and have to ask, and have to go into different branches, you see. But for something to be an LVC, you will have to answer yes to the first test, yes to the second test, yes to the third test, and yes to the fourth test, okay? Or maybe one exception is that if you answer no to this test, then you still have a chance to have an LVC course. And I will show you examples of this. So for LVCs, all tests have to pass. Okay, so it's different. So here's an example of how we proceed. Imagine you have a sentence: the fate of the republic rests on your shoulders. It's not Star Wars, it's parliamentary debates from European Commission. And you think, okay, rest on your shoulders sounds idiomatic, right? So what we tell the annotators is the following. First, identify a candidate with your linguistic intuition, and then you will test it against the guidelines. So first, check which components are truly fixed, like you cannot replace them by something else freely. So you know you can have our shoulders, shoulders of the deputies, but you cannot replace shoulders by heads and so on. So the candidate is rest on shoulders, right? And then you go to these guidelines, and I will go to them now. Where did I open them? Here. And I will show you how it looks like. Here. Actually, I think I didn't open it. Okay, guidelines. Now, so we are in the structural test first, because we always start from this. Sorry, here, the signature. We always start from the same place, and we ask: is there a unique verb as a functional syntactic head over the whole? And remember from VULA that there are language-specific examples. So there is English, but there is also Greek. There is also Polish, which is my mother tongue, and so on. And then you look at the candidate rest on shoulders, and you say, okay, yes, there is one verb that is the head of the whole. So I say yes, and then I go. So if it's yes, I go to structural test 2. Does the verb have exactly one lexicalized dependent? Okay, yes. On shoulders is actually the lexicalized dependent of the verb, and there's only one. So the answer is yes. And then so we go here, and then we ask, does the is this single lexicalized dependent the subject, like in Little Bird Told Me, right? No, it's not the subject. It's an object, right? Or oblique. So it's not a subject. So I go here to test S4, and I ask, what is the morphosyntactic category of the dependent on shoulders? And one possibility is here extended NP, so NP with possible appositions. And if this is the case, I go first to the LVC specific tree. So LVC goes first. And I ask, okay, shoulders, is shoulders abstract? No. So I already know it's not an LVC. So I go back. I came from here, right? The answer is no. So now I go to VID specific test, and I go down this cascade, and I ask, is there a cranberry word? No. Do you follow? Okay. Is there can I make a regular replacement of the component and get an unexpected meaning shift? Yes, because I can say I cannot say rest on my head, on my back, on my hands. It won't be the same meaning. The meaning shift is too big to be predictable from the format change. So the test is yes, the answer is yes. And this is a VID, you see? Okay, so that's how we go back to flat. We annotate this thing, VID. It's a long process. At the beginning, you think like, I will be dead, because it takes you 15 minutes for one example. But then you will realize that you remember these tests very well, and you remember the flow, and most of the time you go through LVC first and VID then, and then you just go very fast. So I summarize the steps here, but it's basically the same thing. And now let's have an example of something that could be an LVC. I hate to put a little pressure on you. Sentence 4 from the previous step. Okay. So we go to the guidelines again. Do I have time to do it? I think so, yes. And remember first from the structural tests, if it's an extended NP, which is the case, put pressure, right? I first go to the LVC specific decision tree. And then I ask, okay, is the noun abstract? It is, pressure is abstract. Is the noun a predicate? And remember, a predicate for us means it has semantic arguments. And the pressure cannot exist without something making pressure, putting pressure, and the thing or the person on whom or which the pressure is being put. So there are at least two semantic arguments. So it is a predicated noun. That's our definition. Okay. So it's yes here. We come here, and now the test is. Does the verb only add meaning expressed as morphological features to the verb? I mean, of course, the fact that the verb is plural, singular, or it's past or future, it adds semantics, of course. But our formulation is, if the added semantic from the verb is only expressed by morphology, we don't care. We don't want more added meaning than that. Okay. So here, put pressure, I feel it would be a yes. So the answer is yes, and the final test is, can we reduce, I will go to, can we build an NP without the verb, in which the verb subject becomes the nth dependent? So for instance, Paul had a walk becomes Paul's walk, and the verb is no longer this, and can these two things refer to the same event? This is the question. Okay. So in put pressure, I hate to put pressure on you. It's my pressure on you, right? And I feel I as a linguist, fake linguist actually, decide that it refers to the same event. If so, then it's a yes, and it brings me to the final step where it says it is an LVC. Okay, and I also have an example about an LVC cause. Put limits, which is nice because it's the same verb, but here limits could exist without anyone putting them. That's why it's not a semantic, that's why the subject is not the semantic argument of the noun, and that's why we go to the LVC cause branch. Okay? So I won't go through this, but what is important for me is to stress that LVCs are special in this framework. First of all, you all know that it's a gray zone between what is idiomatic and what is productive. And it shows in our guidelines because, first of all, you can see that the noun keeps its original sense, right? Pressure is a pressure. And in VIDs, most of the time it's not the case. When I put something on your shoulders, it's not really your shoulders, right? It's not the literal meaning. Okay. Now, the verb may be either specific to few nouns, like pay visit sounds idiomatic because paying is something else than what you do with a visit, right? So you feel you would like to annotate it as idiomatic, but then you have, next to it you have verbs that are shared by many nouns, like do or make. Here it's still idiomatic, we feel, because you cannot replace do by make in many nouns, right? So you still want to capture this, but then there comes a huge range of nouns, of verbs that come with many nouns, with almost whole classes of nouns. The thing is that it took us, I think it was the hardest challenge. It took us weeks and weeks to try to draw the line, and we didn't. We just don't know how. So the only possible decision was to put them out or keep them all in. And we decided to keep them in, which means that in our guidelines and our corpora, you will find LVCs, what we call LVCs, which are highly idiomatic, but also those which are highly productive. And that's what many people complain about, but that's what we managed to do in this binary decision process. So, our contribution still is that we say, okay, we include many things, many of those that you wouldn't like to consider idiomatic, but at least what we do is that we do it in a reproducible way. So it's always the same decision, provided that you answer the same, you give the same answer to the same text. Okay, and another thing you might notice is I told you at the beginning we cannot test semantic composition directly. Instead, we use lexical and morphosyntactic inflexibility, but not for LVCs. Did you notice that all these tests for LVCs are actually not all but one are semantic. Abstractness, being predicative, so semantic arguments. This is semantics, right? Being semantic argument of the noun, adding meaning, and so on. Everything here is semantic. It's not directly the question, is this semantically compositional? But still, it's about semantics, right? The only thing is, the only morphosyntactic thing here is actually this test when you try to take away the verb. So you transform the construction into something else. But notice that it's again different from the other multiple expressions, because here, instead of less flexibility, you have more flexibility. With a normal verb, like, I don't know, for us, start a conversation, you cannot omit start and still have the same meaning. So this flexibility is not allowed in our sense, right? While in LVCs, it is allowed. So actually, they are more flexible in this point than totally regular constructions. So they are truly special, you see? Okay. Now, some results. I will go quickly because it's numbers. I don't know if you can draw many conclusions. I will give you the conclusions actually. So here are numbers. So it's a big corpus with 9 million tokens for all 26 languages, big for manually annotated corpus, right? And 130,000 annotated verbal matter expressions across all of them. It's 26 languages, 13 language genera, Over the 4 releases, LVCs and VIDs were confirmed as universal, meaning all languages have them. And a new thing for us was the quantitative importance of inherently reflexive verbs. I think not in Greek or in English, so I won't go into details, but they are very numerous. And overlapping and nesting, which was considered one of the challenges, is actually quite rare in our context. Now, what you can also notice is that LVC full is the biggest category in the whole corpus, right? Now some figures about Greek. Vula said it, but I will repeat that it's actually one of the biggest corpora in this community. The 5th in terms of the number of tokens, the 4th in the number of in terms of the annotations, and the 1st in terms of LVC fulls. So use it because you have many. And this is mainly due to the people, because the Greek team is one of the most active language teams in this community. Vula mentioned all the annotators, but she didn't mention that some of the people really play important or major roles in the international MWE community, like being the representative of the multi-word expression section at the special interest group SIGLEX at the Association of Computational Linguistics. So this is really leading the international community of these researchers. They are volume editors, working group leaders, task leaders, and so on. So they are really active people. And that's why we have such a nice corpus. And I would like also to mention some findings from corpus studies that we made on this corpus. Not all of them, but those specifically dedicated to LVCs. So first of all, you saw that LVC full is the largest category in the corpus. And we also found in several studies that LVCs are shorter, but more discontinuous than verbal idioms. And there are some outliers. The most discontinuous languages in terms of multi-word expressions are German and Arabic. LVCs exhibit much higher morphosyntactic flexibility than verbal idioms. It's like it goes into 8 or even sometimes 30 times more than verbal idioms. So they are really very flexible. They inflect, they can be modified, the nouns can be modified, and so on and so forth. Now we also had language-specific studies about the like verbs themselves, and like in English, like in Greek, people find in other languages too that some verbs connect with very many nouns, like give, make, and so on. Some others with only few nouns. And also vice versa. So most predicative nouns combine with few like verbs, but few of them combine with many. So there's kind of a preference for both words and nouns to be or not to be in LVCs. There is also a very nice study that I really love to make about literal readings of multi-word expressions. So in which we actually formally defined what is a literal reading. And as far as like verb constructions are concerned, but also all other verbal multi-word expressions, an important finding is that even if NLP community considers distinguishing these two occurrences as a major challenge, so deciding if you take a cake, do you say take a cake in English as an idiom? No, you take, no. Give me an idiom with a little, pull strings, whatever, pull strings, right? Even if potentially, of course, you can pull strings literally, actually in corpora, it is an extremely infrequent phenomenon. And it would be great to understand why, because there is no, actually, linguistically speaking, there is no clear reason for that. So also for LVCs, literal readings are very rare. Here's an example. To take place in Polish, the event had place last Saturday. In Polish, we say have place instead of take place. But then you can have a literal place, so you can say the boat had its place of parking in the harbor. Okay, so this is considered literal, while this is considered idiomatic. But again, these things are extremely rare in corpora. right? Which is unusual because it's not because of ambiguity. Simple words are the more ambiguous they are, the more frequent they are actually in corpora. But it's not at all the case with multiple expressions. You see, it's very intriguing. And finally, one final study I want to mention in Arabic is that there are things that Aristotle, I think, wouldn't like in his study about rhetorics. That's what you spoke about, right? Because there are library constructions in which the verb and the noun actually have the same root, like to exit and exit. It resembles something like to live the life of someone, you see. But in Arabic, they observe this with other verbs. Okay. And now I also wanted to mention that all this corpus is surrounded by a whole corpus infrastructure and with a lot of tools that are centralized, so that adding a new language is not that hard. Vula mentioned this, but I want to show you that it's very easy to actually query the corpus, in particular the Greek corpus. So I go to it. The tool is called Grumach, and you have all corpora behind the scene, and you can create queries which are kind of graph language with a graph language behind. And it happens to be, LBC fools happen to be the first example here. So if you click on this in Greek here and you search, you'll find all occurrences of library constructions with a verb. You can see the sentences here and so on. And you can also constrain the occurrences more. You can say, for instance, that the verb has a particular lemma. If you want to look at, this is 14. It has a particular lemma, like, I don't know, take. In Greek, I won't be able to say it, but it's very easy to select from the annotated corpus some occurrences of library constructions or whatever you want with particular features. So we really love this tool. Okay, and I'm a little bit out of time, but it won't be long. So just the last thing to say is that we use this corpus for an NLP task, which is called multiple expression identification. So this means that we put a raw text on input with morphosyntactic annotations, but no multiple expression annotations, and we expect an automatic tool to underline multiple expressions automatically, like people do it manually, right? So what happens usually? So in NLP nowadays, to boost the solution of such a task, what you do is you organize evaluation campaigns. You give people the data, and they jump on them because they love data. So if you give them data, they will work on the data, and you organize a contest in which they solve the task, and you provide the ranking. That's what we do very often. So that's what we did. The task on automatic identification of the verbal multiple expressions, the goal was to automatically identify all verbal multiple expression occurrences in running text in as many languages as we provide. And of course we used our corpus, and the idea is that we give them not the whole corpus, but a big part of it. It's called training corpus. They learn, they create systems that learn regularities, and then they can reproduce these regularities on new corpora. So the part that we train from the training corpus. And there are various evaluation measures for this task. The most well-known are precision, recall, and F measures. So for instance, when you have this text from the first slide, and imagine this is annotated by linguists, and this is annotated by a system. The system made some errors, like Lady Michelle Obama and set the house on fire, and so on. So some occurrences are skipped, some are too long, some are too short, and so on. So how do you say how good is the system? What you do is to say, there are three terms: true occurrences, positive occurrences, and true positives. So true are those that are here in color. They are 8. Positives are those that the system found. Here they are 7. And true positives are those that are found here and also here. And these are 4 here, right? This one, this one, and this one. And then precision is true positives by positives. Recall is true positives by true. And F measure is with a constant here that you can select. Precision times recall by precision plus recall. And you can do it per multiple expression or per token. So per token means that you allow single errors on some span. So for instance, here, preach is correctly annotated, but not 2. Okay? So you will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. 20 tokens are here. Here there are 19 tokens. The correct tokens are 16, and then you divide again. So that's the measure. And then you have different evaluation dimensions where you not only collect these measures for all languages, for every language, but you also calculate cross-lingual macro average. So you want a system that performs well for all languages, okay? So you have a rank for this, and then you can also have phenomenon-specific measures. So you would like to see how well a system does, for instance, on only discontinuous expressions, or on only those expressions that were not seen in the training corpus, and so on, okay? Just some results. You will see that this is not a soft task, okay? The best systems from the last evaluation campaign in 2020 had these scores. So 100 is of course the ideal. Other tasks like part of speech tagging can be solved in some settings with 98, 99% of that measure. Here we are far from this. What is more interesting maybe is per language scores. You can see that these are systems, best systems, not all. That not always the same system is the best, but one was the best for many languages. And Greek actually has results that are very much in the state of the art of, but not as good as, for instance, Romanian and so on, because there are probably some specificities, or the corpus has some particular features. And also some results for LVCs, because we speak about them here. So this was the best system for many languages, but actually some others also excel in particular languages. Greek is again close to the state of the art and sometimes above. But if you compare precisely these results and these results, you will see that sometimes in some language LVCs are harder, and in some languages LVCs are easier than the average. So this is probably because I try to say it here. I start from the end. So on the other hand, LVCs are simpler than the average, because they frequently use the same light verbs, so it's easy to learn this regularity, like make or give and so on. And they have almost always the same structure: verb plus noun or verb plus preposition plus noun. Okay, so this is easy to generalize over. And the nouns are predicative, so the semantic feature is a non-predicative, is something that can be quite well captured by these neural networks that kind of approximate semantics. So this is simplicity, but on the other hand, they are harder because they are so much variable and discontinuous, you see? So this probably makes them, depending on the language and on the corpus, makes them on the border between being easier and being harder than on average. So other conclusions from this talk is that, so we have this corpus for 26 languages, annotated according to unified guidelines with language-specific sections. We do it with decision diagrams for the sake of reproducibility. The tests are driven by syntactic structure. It's a good point for this workshop, which deals with syntax. We know that non-compositionality is a matter of scale, but we do have to make decisions binary. We know that semantic non-compositionality is a major property to capture, but it's hard to test directly. So we apply inflexibility proxy for this test, except for LVCs actually. So they are exceptional. Their tests are largely semantic, and they actually focus on larger syntactic flexibility than in regular expressions, constructions. LVCs are much more flexible and discontinuous than other types of multiple expressions, and MWE verbal multiple expression identification is still an unsolved task. So this is work to come, and I'm very happy to welcome your questions if there are any. Thank you very much for listening.